Mary Wilson stood by the window, watching raindrops stream down the glass. Boston's autumn rain was cold, seeping into her heart. For 7 years, Mary had raised her son Noah alone as a single mother. Her job at the accounting firm was demanding and sometimes exhausting, but whenever she saw Noah's smile, she felt it was all worthwhile. "Mom, look! My dinosaur book!" Noah burst into the living room, shouting excitedly. His light brown hair had grown a bit long, and his blue eyes always sparkled with curiosity. "That's wonderful, Noah," Mary smiled gently as she stroked her son's head. "But we need to get ready to visit Grandma today." Noah's expression clouded slightly. "Is Grandma still in the hospital?" "Yes, she is. But you know, Grandma is a very strong person, so I'm sure she'll get better soon," Mary said, as if reassuring herself too. Mary's mother Eleanor was the former owner of a wealthy real estate company and now lived alone in an upscale neighborhood in suburban Boston. 3 months ago, she had collapsed from a sudden heart attack and had been in and out of the hospital since then. According to the doctors, a complete recovery might be difficult. "Is James coming too?" Noah's question made Mary hesitate for a moment. "Yes, he's coming. He said he's looking forward to seeing Grandma." Noah nodded silently, but there was a slight dissatisfaction in his expression. Mary understood her son's feelings. It had been barely a year from meeting James Morrison to deciding to marry him. Sometimes she herself felt uneasy about how quickly this decision had been made. James was successful as an investment advisor, and from the day they first met, she had been captivated by his charming smile and thoughtful gestures. He always seemed to put Mary and Noah first. However, Noah appeared to be keeping some distance from James. "Noah, James cares about you very much," Mary placed her hand on her son's shoulder. "It takes time for him and us to become a family. Do you understand?" Noah remained silent and nodded slightly. Mary's heart ached at her son's response, but she wanted to believe that time would resolve things. The sound of a phone ringing echoed in the quiet room. Mary looked at the screen and smiled. "It's James," she answered the phone. "Yes, we're getting ready. We can meet at the hospital in 30 minutes. After ending the call, Mary glanced at the photo frames in the living room. They displayed photos of her and Noah smiling. The wedding was only 2 weeks away. She had mixed feelings of anticipation and anxiety about her new life ahead. When they arrived at the hospital, James was already waiting at the entrance. Mary's heart lightened a bit when she spotted his tall figure. "Hey, Mary," James kissed her and winked at Noah. "How are you doing, champ? Feeling good today?" Noah only answered with a small yes. When they entered Eleanor's hospital room, she was reading a book in bed. Her posture was full of dignity. Her white hair was perfectly styled, and she exuded elegance even in a hospital gown. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Mary kissed her mother's cheek. "Oh, Mary. The nurses are making a fuss as usual," Eleanor laughed lightly. "James, you came too." "Of course, Eleanor. I'm glad to see you're doing well," James responded politely. "I wanted to talk to you a bit about recent investment conditions." "Investments? I don't have time for such talk," Eleanor said somewhat irritably. "Mary, how are your wedding preparations coming along?" "They're going well. We've decided on the venue, and we sent out the invitations last week." As the conversation continued, Mary noticed something odd about the questions James was asking her mother. He kept trying to bring up topics related to asset management and real estate. She also didn't miss how her mother skillfully avoided these subjects. "By the way, Mary," Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "You should have a talk with my lawyer before getting married. It's for your future." "Mom, that kind of talk." "No, it's important," Eleanor said firmly. "Call Jonathan tomorrow." On the way home, the car was quiet. James was more silent than usual, occasionally checking his smartphone. Mary looked out the window, pondering. Was her mother's concern just overprotection, or was there something she was missing? When they returned to the apartment, James suddenly went to another room to make a phone call. Before heading to his own room, Noah secretly asked his mother, "Mom, are we really going to live with James?" Mary hugged her son. "Yes, we are. We're going to become a new family." That night, Mary closed her eyes, telling herself that everything would be fine. Morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Joseph's Church, dancing colorful particles of light on the floor. It was a crisp autumn morning typical of October in Boston. Mary stood in front of the mirror, gently stroking the lace hem of her wedding dress with her fingertips. The simple yet elegant silk dress beautifully accentuated her slender figure. Her hair fell softly on her shoulders, decorated with a few small white flowers. "Mom, you look amazing." Noah entered the room in his tuxedo. He was holding a small ring pillow. "Thank you, handsome boy." Mary smiled and adjusted her son's bow tie. "Are you nervous?" "Yes, a little," Noah answered honestly. "But I practiced not dropping the rings." Mary hugged her son. His presence calmed her heart. She also felt great relief knowing that Eleanor had received special permission to leave the hospital to attend. There was a knock at the door, and Mary's best friend Sarah peeked in. "Mary, are you ready? Everyone's waiting." "Yes, I'm fine." Mary took a deep breath. "Let's go." Looking down the long aisle of the church, her new life awaited. James was already standing at the altar, smiling. Dressed in a black tuxedo, he looked even more charming than usual. The moment his gaze fell on Mary, her anxiety vanished in an instant. On both sides of the aisle sat a few invited guests. Mary's colleagues, some old friends, and Eleanor in her wheelchair. On James's side were his parents, several friends, and his brother Robert. Unlike James, Robert's expression was rigid and he didn't seem particularly celebratory. Mary had felt something odd about him since the first time they met. Eleanor's nurse sat beside her and gave Mary a small wave. Eleanor's face looked somewhat tired, but her loving gaze toward her daughter remained unchanged. As the wedding march played, Mary began to slowly walk down the aisle. Noah walked slightly ahead of her, carefully holding the ring pillow. Mary's heart was filled with complex emotions, a mixture of happiness and anxiety. The ceremony proceeded solemnly, and vows were exchanged. When she uttered the words, "in sickness and in health," Mary looked at her mother. Eleanor was smiling modestly, but there was a shadow of worry in her eyes. "Do you take Mary Wilson as your wife and promise to share your life with her?" the priest asked, and James answered firmly, "I do." When it was Mary's turn, she also spoke her vows. At that moment, she sensed from the corner of her eye that Robert was muttering something to James. His expression was clearly displeased. After the exchange of rings, the priest declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," and it was time for the kiss. James's gentle kiss was met with applause from the guests. The reception was held at a small hotel downtown. The banquet hall, decorated elegantly, was filled with warm light. Mary and James sat at the newlyweds' table, receiving words of congratulation. "Congratulations, Mary." Eleanor approached the table in her wheelchair. "You were a beautiful bride." "Thank you, Mom." Mary squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm so glad you could come." Eleanor nodded slightly and said to James, "Please don't forget to make my daughter happy." "Of course, Eleanor," James answered politely. "By the way, how is your health?" "Well, not bad for my age," Eleanor laughed lightly. "Before I return to the hospital, I would like to have a word with you." "Now?" James looked somewhat confused. "Yes, just for a moment," Eleanor said with determination. While James was talking with her mother, Mary was cutting the cake with Noah. Her gaze happened to fall on Robert, who was looking at his smartphone in the corner of the room. He appeared to be typing something. It was a lovely ceremony, a voice suddenly came from behind. Turning around, she saw James's mother, Martha Morrison. "Thank you, Martha," Mary responded politely. "James has always made good choices," Martha said. There was something calculated in her voice. "We're happy to welcome you and Noah into his life." "We feel the same," Mary replied. However, she felt a bit uneasy at the cold light in Martha's eyes. "Noah is a wonderful child," Martha tried to pat Noah's head, but he pulled back slightly. "He's not James's child, is he?" Mary was momentarily speechless at the direct question. "No, he's from my previous marriage." "I see," Martha said only that and smiled. "Eleanor is a lovely person. I heard she's quite wealthy." Mary frowned. "My mother is just a real estate agent." "I see," Martha shrugged lightly. "I'm glad to become part of such a nice family." After Martha left, Mary was overcome with a deep sense of unease. She couldn't shake off the odd feeling about this family. Robert's cold gaze particularly bothered her. When James returned, his expression was somewhat clouded. "How was your talk with Mom?" Mary asked. "Oh, nothing important," James answered somewhat curtly. "Just her usual worries. She seemed to want to talk to you before returning to the hospital." "Yes, just about her will. Elderly people often talk about such things," James laughed lightly. "Come on, let's have more champagne. To our new life." Mary raised her glass, but deep inside, she felt something was off. She was curious about what her mother had discussed with James, but today was her wedding day. She decided to stop harboring doubts. As the reception continued, Mary occasionally looked for her mother. Eleanor was preparing to leave early with her nurse. Mary rushed over to her. "Are you leaving already?" "Yes, I'm a bit tired," Eleanor answered. "Mary, are you happy?" "Of course, Mom. Noah tells me that James sometimes makes phone calls at night," Eleanor said quietly. "Be careful, Mary. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow." "Mom, today. Today is your day, yes," Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "Just promise me. If anything happens, contact me immediately." Mary nodded and kissed her mother. After Eleanor left, she stood alone, deep in thought. Her mother's words, Robert's attitude, Martha's questions. Everything felt a bit strange. "Hey, beautiful bride," James embraced her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" Mary turned and looked into her husband's eyes. "Nothing," she smiled. "Just thinking about our future." James kissed her. "It will be a wonderful future, I promise." The wedding reception was running longer than planned. As it passed 6 o'clock and the venue lighting gradually changed to the warm colors of twilight, Mary, showing signs of fatigue, took her son Noah's hand. "Noah, shall we take a little break?" Mary said gently. "Let's rest in the waiting room, and then we'll say our final goodbyes." Noah nodded slightly. His blue eyes were a little moist with tiredness, but he was trying hard to fulfill his important role in his mother's wedding. "Mom, I want some water." Mary stroked her son's back as they headed toward the waiting room. Her wedding dress still shimmered beautifully, but her body was enveloped in fatigue from hours of standing and socializing. The weeks leading up to the wedding had been a continuous strain. Worries about her mother Eleanor's health, the rushed wedding preparations, and the small doubts lingering in the back of her mind. Still, today was special. A day to celebrate the beginning of a new life. "I'll get you water in a minute," Mary said. "But first, I need to fix this dress a bit." As she reached for the door to the waiting room, she heard James's voice coming from down the hall. He had disappeared from the reception once, but she hadn't thought much of it. As the groom, he probably needed to speak with many guests. However, the voice she heard next froze Mary in her tracks. It seemed that James and his brother Robert were talking in a small reception room. The door was slightly open, and their voices clearly leaked into the hallway. Mary instinctively stopped. "What's with the gloomy face you've had this whole time?" It was James's voice. "It's my wedding day, you could at least offer some congratulations." "Don't joke with me," Robert's voice was low and angry. "Why did you marry someone like her?" Mary's heart began to race at those words. She unconsciously gripped Noah's hand tightly. Noah looked up at his mother with a confused expression, but Mary quietly put a finger to her lips, signaling him to be quiet. "You're still saying that?" James sighed. "I've explained it to you many times. This is our chance." Chance. Robert's voice was full of sarcasm. "How is taking care of that woman and her brat a chance?" "You have no understanding," James's voice was cold. "Eleanor Wilson's assets are among the top in Boston. Just her real estate is worth millions of dollars. All of that will be inherited by Mary. If I marry her, that wealth effectively becomes mine." The blood drained from Mary's face. She pulled Noah closer with trembling hands. Noah sensed that something was wrong and silently nestled against his mother. "That's too risky," Robert said. "Eleanor isn't dead yet, and that old woman is clever. She must be suspicious of you." "Don't worry," James's voice was full of confidence. "Eleanor's health is worse than we thought. The doctors say she has 6 months to live. Before she dies, I need to convince Mary to let me manage the inheritance. After that, it's easy." Tears fell from Mary's eyes. The true nature of the man she had believed she loved for the past year was this ugly. Noah looked up at his mother anxiously, but Mary could only grip his hand tightly. "There's still risk," Robert's voice continued. "What about Mary? Do you know her secret?" "Actually," James cut in, "I know. Who she is, why she's a single mother, I investigated it all. I even know the real reason her ex-husband left. Her weakness is rather convenient. I can use it if necessary." At that moment, Mary held her breath and gripped her 7-year-old son's hand tightly. She couldn't even wipe the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Does Vanessa know?" Robert's voice could be heard. "That you're doing this?" "Of course," James laughed. "She's part of the plan. If Mary becomes a problem, I was planning to disappear with Vanessa and the money. But now, I've found a way to get it legally. Through marriage." "Then why did you call me?" Robert's voice was skeptical. "Because you're my brother," James's footsteps came closer. "And when the plan succeeds, there's a share for you too. Just keep quiet today. I don't want Mary to get suspicious." Footsteps approached. Mary quickly pulled Noah along and began walking toward the opposite end of the hallway. She couldn't let James see her. In her mind, she recalled her mother Eleanor's warning words, "Be careful." And now she understood everything. Just as Mary and her son turned the corner of the hallway, she heard a door opening behind them. She didn't look back. Something within her had crumbled, and simultaneously, a new determination was sprouting. When they reached the waiting room, Mary closed the door and locked it. She knelt down and cradled Noah's face in both hands. "Noah, listen," her voice was trembling but full of determination. "We need to leave here. Right now." "What's wrong, Mom?" Noah's eyes were wide with anxiety. "There's no time to explain," Mary stood up and grabbed her handbag. "Just trust me. We're going to a safe place." "What about James?" Noah's question pierced Mary's heart. He's not coming with us," Mary answered quietly. She quickly stuffed valuables into a small bag and put on a coat over her wedding dress. It looked unnatural, but this was no time to worry about such things. We'll go out through the back door. Mary took Noah's hand. Quietly, without being seen by anyone. They went outside through the back exit of the waiting room. The cold autumn wind struck their cheeks. Various thoughts swirled in Mary's mind. The pain of betrayal, fear, and anger. But strongest of all was her maternal instinct to protect her son. Hailing a taxi, Mary said without hesitation, "Massachusetts General Hospital, please." Noah silently nestled against his mother. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he sensed his mother's determination. "It's going to be all right, Noah," Mary stroked her son's hair. "We're together. We'll definitely get through this." As the taxi began driving toward the hospital, a new determination was budding in Mary's heart. To go to her mother, tell her the truth, and begin a new life for herself and her son. She would never again let a man like James Morrison destroy their lives. She looked out the window, watching the scenery flow by. A bride leaving her wedding. Yet strangely, her heart felt clear. Sometimes the worst moments open the door to new beginnings. Mary squeezed Noah's hand once more. Their real journey was just beginning. On the way back from Massachusetts General Hospital, Mary's heart was filled with determination. Eleanor had been surprised by her daughter's sudden visit but quickly understood the situation and told her, "Don't go back to your apartment. Go to my house. The key is in the usual place." It was past 9 in the evening when they arrived at Eleanor's house in suburban Boston. Mary put the exhausted Noah to bed in the guest room. He was confused but soon fell asleep. "Noah, it's okay. Mom will protect you." Mary kissed her son's forehead and left the room. She was still wearing her wedding dress. Standing in front of the mirror, she stared at her reflection. This morning she had been a happy bride. Hours later, she had become a victim of deception. She slowly took off her dress and showered. As hot water enveloped her body, her tears finally flowed freely. After her shower, Mary went to her mother's room. She picked up the mobile phone Eleanor had left behind and checked for missed calls. As expected, there were over a dozen calls from James. She ignored them all and instead called her mother's lawyer, Jonathan Kane. "Mary? How was the wedding?" Jonathan's voice was mixed with surprise. "Eleanor contacted me, and I'm supposed to meet with you tomorrow." "Jonathan, could we meet today?" "It's an emergency." Mary's voice was calm, but there was strong determination behind it. "Today. It's already late, but..." Jonathan thought for a moment and said, "All right, let's meet at the office in 30 minutes." Mary left the house quietly, careful not to wake Noah. She borrowed her mother's car and headed downtown. In her mind, she was forming a plan of what to do next. Gather evidence. Expose James's true identity. And most importantly, protect Noah. The next morning, Mary woke up early. Last night, after discussing with Jonathan, she had started the necessary legal procedures: annulment of the marriage, protection of assets, and most importantly, filing for a restraining order. She quietly peeked into Noah's room. Her son was still sleeping. She made breakfast and sat at the table, thinking about her next move. To fully expose James's true identity, she needed more evidence. "Mom, aren't we going back home?" Noah entered the kitchen with a sleepy voice. "We'll be staying at Grandma's house for a while," Mary answered gently. "Noah, do you remember what happened yesterday?" "Yes," Noah nodded slightly. "James was saying bad things." "That's right." Mary placed pancakes in front of Noah. "Noah, can you tell me something? Have you ever heard James talking about money?" Noah thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. He made phone calls at night. He was talking about Grandma's money." Mary gently took her son's hand. "Thank you, Noah. That's important information." After breakfast, Mary left Noah at her mother's house and headed to her apartment. She intended to search through James's belongings while he was away. Before turning the key at the apartment, she took a deep breath. Until the day before the wedding, this had been a happy home for her and her son. The apartment was completely silent. James's belongings had already been moved in, but he himself was not present. Mary began by examining his suitcase. She found nothing particularly suspicious, except for his cell phone charger left behind. On a hunch, Mary began searching for James's laptop. She found a briefcase hidden at the back of the closet. It was locked, but Mary tried the pin she had seen James use before, the last 4 digits of his birthday. With a click, the case opened. Inside were a laptop and several documents. Mary first turned on the laptop. Again, the password was his birthday. "Not very security conscious, are you?" she murmured. When Mary opened his emails, she found shocking content. Numerous intimate emails between James and a woman named Vanessa. Even more shocking were the attached documents, detailed research reports on Eleanor's assets and documents gathering Mary's personal information. "My God!" Mary gasped. There was also information about her past. How she had once been a victim of investment fraud and lost all her assets. How her ex-husband had abandoned her immediately afterward. This was the Mary's secret that James had been referring to. The experience of losing her fortune and being abandoned by her husband had been Mary's greatest setback in life. But for Noah's sake, she had recovered and rebuilt her life from scratch. It was because she had overcome that pain that she was who she was today. James had intended to use that vulnerability against her. Searching further, she found emails indicating that James and Vanessa had executed similar plans in the past. They targeted wealthy women, especially those with vulnerabilities, and used marriage to steal their assets. Mary printed all the emails and copied them to a USB drive as well. Next, she examined the documents in the briefcase. They even contained information about Eleanor's bank accounts and credit cards. "He was targeting my mother from the beginning." Mary was filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. An even more shocking discovery was documentation about James's true identity. His real name was James Harrison, and Morrison was an alias. He had been arrested for fraud, but the case had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. While gathering toiletries from the bathroom, Mary found a small medicine bottle in James's medicine box. There was no label, but she knew what the medicine was. Just before Eleanor had collapsed from a heart attack, James had eaten dinner with her at Eleanor's house. Everything connected. James had targeted Eleanor. But when Eleanor didn't die and began recovering in the hospital, he changed his strategy and approached her daughter, Mary. He chose to marry her as a way to legally access the assets. As Mary was gathering evidence, she suddenly heard the sound of a key turning in the door. She hastily stuffed the documents into her bag. "Mary?" It was James's voice. There was no time to escape. Mary took a deep breath and composed herself. She couldn't arouse his suspicions now. "James," she responded, feigning calmness. "Why did you leave me at the wedding venue?" James's expression looked worried, but there was something cold in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "You disappeared. Everyone was worried." "I felt ill," Mary lied. "Noah wasn't feeling well either, so I went to my mother's house first. I tried to find you to tell you, but I couldn't." "I see," James seemed relieved. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "I left it in the car," Mary smiled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you." James approached her and tried to embrace her. Mary hid her revulsion and accepted the embrace. "I'm planning to stay at my mother's house with Noah today," she said. "She's still weak." "I understand," James said. "How is Eleanor doing?" That question, knowing the intent behind it, sent a chill down Mary's spine. She's recovering. The doctors are giving positive projections. I see. James's voice had a hint of disappointment. I'm praying for her recovery. That afternoon, Mary took all the evidence to Jonathan's office. The lawyer carefully reviewed it and advised contacting the police. This is clearly attempted fraud, Jonathan said. And the medicine bottle issue is very serious. He may have tried to harm your mother. Mary nodded.